I'm going to invite you to turn to Proverbs 16 because that's where we're going to start up this morning. But as you know, we've been working our way through Proverbs now for some time. I think we're a little bit past halfway, but I haven't counted. And so I think we're a little bit past halfway. And what we're doing here is we're trying to find wisdom. Proverbs literally is a compilation of wise sayings, 31 chapters of wisdom, and we're looking to that wisdom to help us navigate the complexity and the brokenness of our world. And one of the more common topics that Proverbs addresses is communication. And I think that's because Solomon really understood how powerful communication is in our lives, in our relationships, in our world. If you know how to communicate, the most difficult problems that you face can be dealt with successfully. On the other hand, if you don't know how to communicate, the smallest, most nonsensical things can just kind of wreak havoc in your life and in your relationships. And so we really need to master communication. And we started focusing on communication last week, and one of the things we pointed out is there's really two parts. There's two elements here. There's an expression side, that's the person who's doing the speaking, and there's the receiving side, and that's the person who supposedly is listening. And we started with the listening side, which may seem like, well, that's out of order, but until you've learned to listen, communication can happen. And so we started with that listening side. Today, we're going to focus on the expression side. And our goal is really quite simple. When we open our mouths, when we speak, that's either going to be beneficial or not. It's either going to be helpful or not. We're either going to be speaking the wisdom of God or not. And what we want is our speech to reflect the wisdom of God. And the million-dollar question is, how do we get there? And when you start working through Proverbs and looking at all the different Proverbs that focus on how we ought to be expressing ourselves, I really think two distinct steps begin to materialize. And the first one is we really need to appreciate how powerful words actually are. Look at some of the descriptions Solomon gives, and then we'll start breaking this down. The tongue has power of life and death. Now, that may seem like an exaggeration, and I guess in a way it is. But Solomon is trying to convince us of this idea. Words are powerful. The tongue has the power of life and death. The mouth of the righteous is like a fountain of life. Again, very powerful. It's a source of life. The things that we convey to one another through our speech can bring life into someone's life when they're struggling. Let me share one more. It's a little bit different picture. A word aptly spoken, and I've often thought about this. It's like apples of gold in settings of silver. What do you think of when you think of golden apples on a silver platter? I think of two things. The first is wealth. Who has golden apples on a silver platter? And the second thing, it's kind of in a picture of prosperity, isn't it? Something that's beautiful, something that is amazing. And you take that life and death, fountain of life, golden apples on a silver platter, and I think what Solomon is trying to express to us is words have power. What I really think we have to understand is that power can be demonstrated in two ways. Hopefully, when we open our mouth, our words would be a blessing. Think about this first proverb. A man finds joy in giving an apt reply, and how good is a timely word? Have you ever had the pleasure of in some kind of relationship in your life? It could be a spouse, it could be a mom, a dad, a child, a brother or sister, that sort of thing. But have you ever had the pleasure of interacting with someone and they're struggling with something in their life? And you draw on your life experience, or you draw on something you've learned in your own personal journey, or something you've gotten from Scripture. You gave them some kind of advice, and it was really helpful. It resonated with them. It allowed them to work through the problem successfully so that the problem was resolved. A man finds joy in giving an apt reply. I've done that with some people. Other people, it's like, well, okay, I wasn't so successful there. But I can tell you what, when you help someone work through some kind of problem so that they get it resolved, you find incredible joy. You feel really good because you were helpful. And it's not just you feeling really good because your words were timely, because your words were on point, and your words were helpful. That other individual is feeling really good too. Again, but the question is, well, how do you come up with those apt replies? And how do you come up with those timely words? And the answer is, we need to have a heart of wisdom, because that's where those things come from. A wise man's heart guides his mouth, and his lips promote instruction. Pleasant words are honeycomb, sweet to the soul, they're healing to the bone. Where do those pleasant words, those helpful words, those words that are like a honeycomb, that are sweet to the soul, words that bring healing to that individual that's hurting, where does that come from? A wise man's heart guides his mouth. And when that is true, we can have that apt reply. We can have that timely word. We can have those pleasant words that promote instruction, that are sweet to the soul, that bring healing to the bones. One more proverb. Oh, I might have pushed the button too soon. I think I skipped one. The wise in heart. I skipped verse 21. I'm old. The wise in heart are called discerning, and pleasant words promote instruction. Do you have people in your life that when you're around them and you've interacted with them, you spent time with them, you walk away feeling better, feeling energized, feeling encouraged? When I look at verse 21, and I'll push the button now, and I look at the description here in 23 and 24, I think of Barnabas. Do you remember Barnabas from the early chapters of the book of Acts? Something you may not be aware of, Barnabas wasn't his name. It's what they called him. You know why they called him that? Barnabas means son of encouragement. Now think about that nickname, because that's kind of what it is. It's a nickname. If your nickname was son of encouragement, how would you get a name like that? I think right here And in verse 21, the wise in heart are called discerning, and pleasant words promote instruction. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, healing. I think you'd have to be that kind of person that when people interacted with you, when people had a conversation with you and then they walked away, they felt better, they felt encouraged, they felt energized. And that all starts in the heart. A wise man's heart guides his mouth. So that because that heart of wisdom is where his speech originates, what comes out is a blessing. It's helpful. Our words can be a blessing. Unfortunately, as I pointed out earlier, the power of our words can go in two directions. So we need to understand the power of our words in a negative sense. A scoundrel plots evil, and his speech is like a scorching fire. Think about that for just a second. When I read that verse, I think of the Sierras. There's a lot of places I go, and I hope God is not trying to send me a message here, but a lot of places I like to fish have burned in the last couple years. And I think the one is at least 5. It might be 6 or 7 years now. And you know what? You can see a recovery starting. But I've driven by areas where the fire was 20 and 30 and 40 years ago. And guess what? It's still not recovered. And Solomon says our speech can be like a scorching fire. And that's true. And some of you know it's true because you have the scarring in your heart from words that were spoken years ago, maybe decades ago. Looking at the next proverb, a perverse man stirs up dissension. Gossip separates close friends. We kind of touched on this a little bit last week when we were talking about the importance of listening. Because some of the Proverbs address this idea of gossip. And if there's no one there to listen to gossip, you can't have gossip, right? This kind of touches on that expressive side of it. What can gossip do? What can someone who's speaking maliciously do? They can cause division and dissension and separate chief friends. I think we have to be very careful. If there's someone in your life that you feel there's some kind of problem that needs to be addressed, you know who you should be talking to about that? That person, not someone else. I think we have to be very careful and understand the difference between talking to someone and talking about someone, because when we're talking about someone, it can be very, very harmful. Another proverb, when words are many, sin is not absent, but he who holds his tongue is wise. And I think what the idea here is, if you can't manage the number of words that you say, you're probably not any better at managing how you say them. So that what comes out of your mouth can end up being hurtful, can end up being offensive. Another proverb, and I use this one all the time. A soft answer, a gentle answer, a gracious response can turn away an explosive situation so that it never happens. But a harsh word, that's like throwing gas on the fire. And it goes boom. Another proverb, Proverbs 17:4, starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam. So drop the matter before a dispute breaks out. Again, just because of where we live, I think that's a really powerful picture. What would happen if the Maloney's Dam or the Don Pedro Dam ruptured? We'd be in big trouble. Now, you'd be in worse trouble because Riverbank is 108, and I think Modesto's only 100 feet. So we would have 8 more feet than you guys. You'd be swimming, and we'd still be on dry ground. But that would be temporary because I have a feeling the whole valley would be doomed if one of those dams or both of those dams fractured. And Solomon's using that as a picture. That when we're quarrelsome, that has the effect of breaching a dam, and so he advises us, drop the matter. Don't be quarrelsome. Continuing on, and kind of continuing that thought, he who loves a quarrel loves sin. And he's talking about, conflict. I don't know many people that like conflict. I know that if you use a scale of 1 to 10, some people are like 0 in their ability to deal with conflict. They're just conflict adverse. And some people, and we have to understand there's a difference between, okay, I'm willing to deal with conflict. I'm comfortable dealing with conflict. That's different than I really like conflict. I like to go fishing. I figure out ways to go fishing. I can tolerate conflict. I don't go looking for it. I don't want it. But okay, if it shows up, we'll deal with it. That's just, it's called reality. What Solomon's saying, and if we pierce it back, starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam. Well, if you're in verse 19, you love the quarrel, you're probably going to start a lot of quarrels, which means there's going to be a lot of dams bursting and a lot of destruction left in your wake. He who loves a quarrel loves sin. I think Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, didn't he? I think Jesus is way more in line with peacemaking than being quarrelsome. So I think what Solomon's saying is if you love conflict, if you love the quarrel, there's something wrong with you. Because the heart of God is peace. One last one. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but he delights in airing his own opinion. And put that together with what we discussed last week. How do you get understanding? It requires listening, right? That's the purpose of listening. It's to gain an understanding, because until I have an understanding of what has been said, I can't accurately respond to it. My response will not be rooted in connected to what this person has just said. And a fool isn't interested in understanding, therefore they're not interested in listening. But they're very much interested in airing their own opinions. They're in a hurry to express themselves, despite the fact that they don't understand. And that's not just foolish. It can also be harmful. So step one in trying to get a handle on how we express ourselves, step one is I need to understand how powerful my words are. They can be a blessing. They can be harmful. And I want to get into that side where when I open my mouth, it's a blessing. That leads us to step 2, which is learning to practice disciplined speech. Look at some of the words Solomon uses. A man of knowledge uses words with restraint. A man of understanding is even-tempered. Even a fool is thought wise if he's able to remain silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. That word restraint, the idea of being even-tempered, the idea of being able to control the impulse to speak and remain silent, they all speak to the idea of discipline, to the idea of control. And Solomon has a lot to say about how we get there. So we'll start with this idea of restraint. We've probably all heard the saying, it is better to remain silent, even if others think you're a fool, than to open your mouth and remove any doubt. Right? Anybody not ever hear that? Solomon is trying to tell us sometimes we need to practice restraint. You need to guard your lips. You may need to bite your tongue. That will protect you and those around you from the kind of damage an uncontrolled mouth can bring into a situation. So that we look at 2 Proverbs. He who guards his lips, what's he doing? He's guarding his life, and I would say not just his life, but those around him. But he who speaks rashly will come to ruin. He who guards his mouth and his tongue keeps himself from calamity. So the first way we practice discipline is we learn restraint. Another way we can discipline ourselves in the area of speech is by making sure when we speak, we're speaking the truth. A truthful witness gives honest testimony. A false witness tells lies. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. The Lord detests lying lips. He delights in men and women who are truthful. A truthful witness saves lives, but a false witness is deceitful. I want to start with that verse 22 there. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in men and women who are truthful. We learn something about God there. We learn about what he likes and what he doesn't like. And the first question I would have is that important to you? Because I can think of people that I want to be close to. And the easiest example is Diane. When we were dating, I was paying attention to trying to figure out what does she like and what does she not like. Because I've told you this before, dating is a lot like fishing. You got to use the right bait. And the right bait in this case was, what does she like and what doesn't she like? Because I was attracted to her. I wanted to win her over, right? Here we're learning something about God and what he likes and dislikes. And I don't know about you, and I don't want to speak for you, but I want to be the kind of individual that when God looks at me, well, I'm going to talk about Job in a little bit. But do you remember the story of Job and how he ended up with all the calamity? It's because Satan went in and had a conversation with God, and he started bad-mouthing the human race. And God said, hey, have you ever looked at my friend Job? Have you ever considered him? He's as good as it gets. And I bring that up for the simple reason. I would like God to think about me in that same way that he thought about Job. When God looks out of heaven down at whatever I'm up to, I would like whatever I'm up to bring a smile to his face, that he would be pleased with me. And what I see in verse 22 is, whenever I step outside of truth, even in a small way, just because I'm exaggerating, because we do that. I tell you this all the time. Usually the next thing that comes after "you always" or "you never" is a lie. It's called exaggeration, but it's also called a lie. And as soon as we step out of truth, the Lord detests lying lips. I'm no longer pleasing to him when I step outside of truth, but he delights in men and women who are truthful. Another thing, and I think I have to go back here for this one. Truthful lips endure forever. A lying tongue lasts only a moment. The reason that is, the root idea of truth is reality. And a lie can serve a purpose in our minds. It serves a purpose. If it served no purpose, we would never tell a lie. Right? So in the moment, it serves a purpose. And we think, okay, I've navigated that. But because it's not rooted in reality, eventually the lie gets found out, the non-truth gets exposed, and when it is exposed, you've just now lost trust with that individual. And trust is like money. It takes a long time to earn it, and you can blow it just like that. Third thing we see here is the truth is helpful, and I think I have to go back to that last screen. A truthful witness saves lives. That's probably another one of those Solomon-like exaggerations. But I don't think there's any argument, a truthful witness. And what's that? That's someone who is open and honest. That's helpful. Because we all have blind spots. We all have things that we don't notice about ourselves. Jesus pointed that out. I can see specks of imperfection in other people's lives, and I can have big old logs in my own and not be aware. And so a truthful witness can be really, really helpful, because there's a big difference between what I want to hear and what I need to hear. And a truthful witness will not tell me what I want to hear. They'll tell me what I need to hear, if that makes sense. Another way we can be disciplined. And if I had less time, I would skip this one. And it would be obvious in a moment. The lips of the righteous know what is fitting, but the mouth of the wicked only what is perverse. Like one who takes away a garment on a cold day, or like vinegar poured on soda, is one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Now, what's Solomon addressing here? He's addressing the appropriateness of our words, of our communication in the moment. And so you have to break that down, because part of it is timing. You can say the exact right thing that needs to be said, but if you say it at the wrong time, guess what? It's not helpful. I always use the same explanation. Have you ever lost your keys? It is a universal fact. I'm not sure it's been scientifically proven, but it is a universal fact. You never lose your keys when you have nowhere to go. You only lose your keys when, one, I have somewhere to go and I'm running late. That's when you lose your keys. And someone that loves you deeply can say, Andy, if you put your keys where they belonged, this would not happen. And that would be absolutely the truth, would it not? That would be horrible timing. Andy doesn't need instructions on what to do with his keys at the moment. What does he need? He needs his keys. You can give me a lecture, next week. Right now, help me find my keys. So it speaks to timing. It speaks to tone. I had a painful lesson on tone. I think it was this week. It might have been last week. But I was doing something, and I don't know what this thing's called. I call it the sifter. And Diane had the sifter in the flour bin because she was sifting flour with it. So I said, "Where's the sifter?" Because it wasn't where it usually is. "Oh, it's in there." Well, we have other sifters. So I got a smaller sifter that I don't generally use because I don't have 4 hands. So I would need someone to hold the small sifter, but with the big sifter, I don't need that, right? So you get the picture. She's trying to be helpful. She's going to go to the sifter, get it out of the flour bin, and wash it. And in my mind, this is what I'm thinking. I know what flour and water do when mixed together. It turns to glue. I don't want that sifter. And apparently, telling her I didn't want that sifter, my tone was not that of a tree of life or a fountain of life. It was something other than that. Now, I wasn't trying to use the wrong tone, so apparently it is part of my spiritual gift mix. And I hurt her with my tone. And when the tone is off, the message cannot be appropriate or fitting. Does that make sense? So it speaks to the timing. It speaks to the tone. It speaks to the content. What words am I using? I saw a joke on the internet the other day, and the woman, it's that normal old joke. Do these jeans make me look fat? Or make my butt look fat, or something like that. And the husband says, "If I answer, do you promise not to hold it against me?" And she said, "Yeah." And he said, "I smoked crack after work and sold our car." Which is really funny. You all laughed because it's funny. If the content of our message, so that the words we're using and the tone that we're using and our gestures and our facial expression and our body, if they're not all aligned, if something's off, like in my mind is like, no, I don't want the big sifter. It's gonna be covered with goopy flour and will be of no use to me. In my mind, that's a good thought. But apparently, my tone and everything else with it was very poorly executed, and it negates the whole message. So that you end up like one who takes away a garment on a cold day. What would you call someone like that? A jerk, right? You end up being a jerk. I'm not really sure what vinegar does when it's poured on flour, but I'm kind of thinking that's like one of those things that when you're in high school and everybody thinks chemistry class is boring, so every chemistry teacher in the world knows super chemistry teacher tricks to entertain the audience so they pay attention at least some of the time while you're sitting in chemistry class. Or one who sings songs to a heavy heart. Do you ever Do you ever have one of those days where you're just feeling good, so you sing along with the radio? You ever do that? You don't do that when you're down in the dumps. You do that when you're happy, right? When you're joyful, when things are going well. Do you ever have a situation in your life where I'm not going to have the TV on, I'm not going to have the radio on. If I'm driving, I'm just going to drive in silence. If I'm sitting around, I got things on my mind that I need to work out, and I want silence. In those moments, the last thing that you want is a sing-along, right? One who sings songs to a heavy heart. That reminds me of Job's friends. I told you we'd talk about Job. And he has all these calamities, and his friends come. And the bulk of the book, if you're familiar with it, is his friends piling on, saying, Job, we don't know what you did, but we do know you did something wrong, because God would not be treating you this way if you hadn't done anything wrong. And so his friends are piling on, kicking him when he's down, and he's defending himself against their accusations. But before they said a word, the story tells us when they heard about Job's calamities, they traveled to him. They sat down with him in silence for 7 days. That's when they were at their best. They didn't sing songs to a heavy heart. They didn't kick him when he was down. They just sat there in silence. Our words, our interactions need to be fitting and appropriate. One last one and we'll be done. Our words should be healthy. They should bring healing into the moment. Reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. An anxious heart weighs a man down, but a kind word cheers him up. One more. The tongue that brings healing is a tree of life, but a deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. Let me start with verse 18 there. I think we all understand how words can pierce like a sword. We even have that phrase that we use, oh, that person has a sharp tongue, right? I don't know that there's a connection there, but certainly it seems like there could be. I think what we should understand is sometimes that's intentional. I'm angry. I've been hurt. I feel like I've been backed into a corner, so I'm lashing out. I'm striking back, and I think it's fair to say, even if you have justifiable reasons to be hurt and angry, that response is always wrong. I think where we need to kind of pay some attention is the fact that can be completely unintentional, and we may not be trying at all, but our words still pierce like a sword. Because I talked about communication last week, and I knew I'd talk about communication this week. That subject matter's on my mind, and I can't tell you how many in like TV shows I've been watching where I've noticed, man, what was that person thinking? Why would they ever say that to that person? That's really hurtful. And if I can notice hurtful, because I've already demonstrated to you all today that I have the ability to speak in inappropriate ways. So if I can notice, man, that's not the right thing to say, it's really out of line. And it's that unintentional. Isn't that the word, kind of what the word reckless means? It's like unthinking, not aware. It's just, okay, it's like I'm flying by the seat of my pants. And just whatever comes to mind, I blurt it out. And it can be so hurtful. If we want to be effective at communicating, and I know, because I do this, and it's called being defensive. You justify whatever it is that you said, and it's like, well, you should be able to accept that. I need to put some work in on my side of the equation so that when I open my mouth, it makes it easier for you to accept it. Does that make sense? It's like, yeah, you can be brutally honest. You could take the truth and, beat someone over the head with it. Your message is probably going to be received much better if you take some time and make sure I'm saying this in the best possible way that I can, because I really want you to be able to hear it. And I know sometimes the truth can be hurtful. And I'm not saying let's not speak the truth. No, we need to speak the truth. But I think we need to understand, and I hate using this phrase, and in general I would reject this phrase. But in that context, there can be a my truth, there can be a your truth. And for me to express to you what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, what I think would be helpful, I need to do some work and understand where you're coming from so that I can speak into that if I want it to be helpful. As verse 25 says, an anxious heart weighs a man down. A kind word can cheer him up. A kind word can lift his spirits. A kind word can be encouraging. And it's kind of like, okay, if you're looking for your keys and I'm saying, well, if you put them where they belong, that might be true. I don't think that's going to cheer you up. I don't think that's going to encourage you. And I want my words, and I hope you want your words to be more like a tree of life than words that would weigh someone down. And so I really think we need to think about that idea of I want my words to be healing. I want them to be helpful. Now, let me try to wrap this up for today. In the last 2 weeks, I hope you've noticed that Solomon has an awful lot to say about communication. And I think it's because he understands how incredibly powerful communication is. And another one of those sayings that we use in our day is, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Is that true? No, that's a lie. I understand why people say it, but that doesn't make it true. And we are all evidence of that fact. We have been hurt by words. Some of us still have the wounds and still have the scars, and the thing still hurts today as much as it did when the words were originally spoken. Words can hurt. Words do hurt. And the reality is we can't change what has happened in the past. Whether we've been on the receiving end, whether we've been on the expression side of it, we can't change the past. But what we can do, as follower of Jesus, I can determine, hey, there's a reason why Solomon put all of this in the book of Proverbs, this book of wise sayings, and it would be wise of me to listen to what he has to say and try to work at putting these things into practice in my life. And with that in mind, I want to give you kind of a grid, if you will, and it can be helpful to get to where when we open our mouth, it's much more likely that the wisdom of God is going to be reflected in our speech. If we get into the mindset of using this as a filter, starting with, what am I about to say? Is it true? Because we have no business speaking outside of truth. So what am I about to say? Is it true? Why am I saying it? Is it loving? Am I trying to be helpful? Because as I said earlier, the truth is not a club that we use to beat people into submission or to win an argument. So I need to speak the truth, but I need to speak it in a loving, helpful way. 3, where am I saying it? That should be when am I saying it? Is this the right time? Or would it be better to push pause? Like, for instance, we talked about emotions last week. If we're not in an emotional state where we can have a constructive conversation, it's much better to say, time out. I agree, we need to talk about this, but I can't do it right now in a constructive way. And so let's talk about it after dinner, or let's talk about it tomorrow, or just give them a time and a place when we'll talk about it, rather than try to have a conversation where instead of the soft answer that turns away wrath, I throw a bucket of gas and go boom. So when am I saying it? Is this the right time? How am I saying it? Am I using the right tone? Am I using the best words? Are all my gestures and facial expressions and other kinds of body language, is that all aligned with what I'm trying to say? How am I saying it? And one last one. Who's really speaking here? And what I mean by that is this the kind of thing that Jesus would say? Because if Jesus would not say it, do you think we ought to be saying it? I don't think so. And when we take these things, what am I about to say? Is it true? Why am I saying it? Is it helpful, loving? When am I saying it? Is this the right time? How am I saying it? Is this the best way? Is this something Jesus would approve of? When we start speaking in line with that filter, here's where we're going. A wise man's heart guides his mouth, and his lips promote learning. Let's pray. Father, thank you for all of this wisdom. It reminds me of James, where he talks about the tongue, and he says, if we get control of that tongue, we are perfect men and women, and we have demonstrated the ability to discipline every other area of our life. James understood how difficult it is to bridle our tongues. Solomon understood how powerful words are. And we have all experienced it. I suspect we have all had people speak into our lives in helpful ways, and it really was. Their words were like a fountain of life. It was like a tree of life. We were better because of the words that they shared with us. More than likely, far more often, we've been wounded by words. And because those wounds are real and we understand the pain they should cause, I pray we should learn that our words can be powerful and our words can wound. And I would like to think we would determine in our hearts, I don't want to be that man, I don't want to be that woman that goes around wounding people and hurting people. I want to be that man or woman that God looks out of heaven and smiles because they get it. They've learned how to listen. They've learned how to express themselves in a way that their words are like a fountain of life. They speak the truth in love. Father, I pray that we would all aspire to be that person. And no matter where we are on a scale of 1 to 10, if we're at the bottom of the ladder, 0, 1, we can aspire to do better. If we're already pretty good, if we're up there in the 7s and 8s, none of us are perfect. No matter how good we're doing, there's always room for improvement. May we aspire to be the kind of people who know how to listen, and when we open our mouths, it is evident that God is speaking through us. I lift that up to you and ask that you would make it so in my life and in the lives of these folks, so that you could be glorified through our efforts. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.